You don't have to. Okay, thank you. Ishmael.
Shay, it may not be the PDF you have. Let me,
Oh, okay.
Brian just sent these presentations.
Okay.
So let me forward them to your email now.
Okay.
Otherwise, I have them on mine as well, but.
Okay, I have 6 o'clock. Ishmael, did you make me the host and I can share from the email?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. May I have a roll call vote, Shay?
Yes. Dr. Miranda Avant Elliott,
Present.
Dr. Beckwith. You may be muted, Dr. Beckwith. Still muted. Okay.
Present. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Jones,
Here.
Ms. Oswald,
Present.
and Ms. Morreale. Okay.
We have a quorum. We are meeting today. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Been moved in second to approve the agenda. Do I need a roll call vote?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. We will then move
All in
on.
favor?
We do need to approve it.
You do need a motion.
We have,
I have a motion to approve it.
yes,
Was there a second?
we need to vote.
Okay, roll call vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all right. We would then move on to the item for business tonight. Shay, I'm not sure if I'm turning it over to Mr. Levon or if I'm turning it over to Brian.
I will, Ms. Morreale, good evening. I will introduce Brian and just have a few words before he speaks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, Special Administrative Board, Dr. Pruitt-Adams, colleagues and community. Tonight is the special board meeting to accept and approve the 2020-2021 audit. On an annual basis, our district goes through an audit of district obligations, federal obligations. And so tonight, our auditors, who have been our auditors for quite some time, have joined us tonight to present our financial statements and also our federal and state package. So without further ado, we have Brian Wirtz, and he will introduce himself and members of his team. So Brian, thank you.
Just me tonight. As Levon said, I'm Brian Wirtz. I'm a partner with Kovrek and Breckel, who are the independent auditors for the district. We met with management and board yesterday and went through this information and got it all finalized today. And so we're here to discuss the results of our audit. If you want to, Shay, are you going to?
Excuse me, Brian, which
Yes.
document do you want Ms. Fields to open?
That one.
Okay.
So if you want to go to the next slide. So what we always talk about when we have an audit is what each other's responsibilities are when it comes to an audit. And it's management's responsibility to determine the accounting policies that will be used to prepare the financial statements. The management has selected to prepare the financial statements in accordance with modified accrual basis of accounting. So the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial statements are both prepared on the modified accrual basis of accounting. That is the basis of accounting that's acceptable under government accounting standards for fund financial statements, but the government-wide financial statements should be prepared on the full accrual basis of accounting. So in our opinion, we have a little paragraph that states that. The other part that it's management's responsibility is to maintain an internal control structure to, one, safeguard the district's assets and to determine that the financial statements are free of material misstatement, whether it's due to error or fraud. It's our responsibility then to express an opinion on the fair presentation of those financial statements prepared by management. In planning our audit, we use a risk-based approach, which means we as a team, our audit team gets together and We discuss where we think there are risks that a material misstatement in the financial statements could exist and go undetected. And then we develop audit procedures to reduce those risks. As a part of our audit, we do review the internal control structures of the district. We test internal controls as they relate to federal programs, but we do not give an opinion on internal controls. That's outside the scope of an audit. And then the last thing I'd like to always hit on is fraud. So we are required to make inquiries of employees and management if they're aware of any fraud. If they are, who would they report it to? But we're not required to develop audit procedures to look for fraud. But if something happens or something comes to our attention while we're doing our audit that leads us to believe there could be fraud, we have to expand our procedures, but we do not have to develop audit procedures to look for fraud or find fraud even. Our audit is performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and uniform guidance, which is the federal program, related to the federal program. We did issue an unmodified opinion this year, which means that based on our audit procedures, the financial statements are prepared materially correctly according to the basis of accounting used by the district, which is the modified accrual basis of accounting. Next slide. Internal controls. There are 3 types of internal control deficiencies that exist. A control deficiency is a minor control deficiency that would not even be required to put into writing. We have a control deficiency, and then a significant deficiency, and then a significant deficiency, which is considered a material weakness. A significant deficiency that's considered a material weakness. The definition of that is that it's more likely than not that a material misstatement in the financial statements could exist and go undetected. It doesn't mean that it's there. It just means that it could exist and go undetected. So in our audit report, we did report material weaknesses and significant deficiencies, which we will discuss. And as a part of our audit, as it relates to federal programs, each program has its own compliance supplement, which tells us what sort of compliance we need to audit. And if there were any deficiencies in that, we'd be required to report that to you. We're happy to report that there was no instances of non-compliance to report. Every year, we have to audit, because the district is not considered a low-risk auditee. We're required to audit 40% of the district's federal expenditures, and every major program needs to be audited once every 3 years. This year, we audited the Educational Stabilization Fund, which is known as ESSER, and the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The type of report we gave on those 2 major programs is an unmodified opinion. And there was one significant deficiency noted on one of the programs that we'll talk about in a second as well. And then there was an audit finding that was required to be disclosed under the uniform guidance, and we'll talk about that as well. We have some procedures as it relates to Missouri laws and regulations, as it relates to budgetary and disbursement procedures, accurate disclosure of attendance, and accurate disclosure of transportation. Those procedures are performed in accordance with attestation standards established by the AICPA, and we did issue an unmodified opinion on that as well. Other required communication. So we're required to disclose this to board and management as a part of our audit. The significant accounting policies used to prepare the financial statements under the modified accrual basis of accounting are Note A. There were no changes in accounting policies. There were no transactions that lacked authoritative guidance. The most significant disclosures is the impact as COVID-19 as it relates to an uncertainty, because even though COVID-19 is 2 years old, could be some financial impact as it relates to that could be material to the financial statements. So we disclose that in Note J. The financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. We had no difficulties encountered in performing our audit, and we're always happy to report that we had no disagreements with management. Other communications, there were no financial misstatements detected as a result of our audit, which means if we were in the course of our audit, if we're what we consider an audit adjustment, that we have to make this adjustment for the financial statements to be in accordance with the modified accrual basis of accounting. We'd have to give you a list of those adjustments that were made. We're happy to report there were none. We did receive a management representation letter, which was dated yesterday. We dated it yesterday because that was the date that we felt we were approved to release these financial statements after our meeting yesterday. That letter basically comes from management and says that the financial statements are complete and accurate to the best of their knowledge. All material information has been disclosed to us as it relates to commitments, contingencies, and subsequent events. If management had any consultations with any other audit or independent accountants throughout the year, we'd be required to disclose that to you. To our knowledge, there was no other communications with other auditors. Always like to express our appreciation with everybody at the district, Levon, Lynn, Virgil, and others that help us get to this point, get us to the end. This year, like last, we're sort of getting down to the wire. We're doing the best that we can to get these things issued. So we always appreciate their efforts as it relates to getting us here, because I know they're putting in a lot of hours to help us with this. So and then this is just the team that did most of the work this year. Nothing significant there. I guess the next thing would be we'll discuss the findings that we had. I don't know if you have that document, but it would be under the federal and state reporting package. Do you have that, Shay? Or not?
I think it's the first item in board docs. The supplemental information is the first one.
So I'll start on the, it's actually, if you want to start on page 11 of that thing. So this is where the findings start. So the first finding we have is our testing in the payroll expenditures disclosed instances of the following matters. Certain business employees have access to in the accounting software to make changes to the employee rates, and timesheets were not always approved by applicable supervisors. This is a repeat finding from prior year. I think last year was 5 or 6 bullet points. So that means when we were doing our payroll procedures, we had 5 or 6 different types of instances of issues. This year we're down to 2. So we're making progress as it relates to this finding, but we still had to report it. If you want to scroll down a little bit more, 2102, we do an expenditure test as a part of our audit. We do a payroll test and an expenditure test. What we noted as it relates to the expenditures is sometimes purchase orders are received after the fact. So there's a override of the internal controls that purchases are being made without an approved purchase order. We discussed this yesterday. All of our districts struggle with this that we work with, just because there's so many people that are making purchases. So it's really hard to control. But when we have instances where this is happening, we're required to disclose that to you. And so that's what that finding is about. And that was reported in prior year as well. The next finding, which is 03, we struggled with getting the ASBR done. The conversion of the software, just other issues. So the ASBR is reported on the cash basis of accounting, and to get that reconciled for every fund to be in balance for those. So the ASBR itself was actually accurate, but the supporting document, the trial balance they used for the ASBR was out of balance. And that's what we used to get to the modified accrual basis of accounting to prepare the financial statements. This is a repeat finding from last year as well. But I think pre-conversion, the district was able to get the ASBR done and get the modified accrual basis financial statements to us. So they've been able to do it in the past. So I would fully expect them to be able to get this removed into the future. So that's that finding. And then the last finding that we have is really just a repeat as it relates to purchase orders, because if we find it in non-federal programs and in federal programs, we have to list it as a federal program finding as well, even though it's the same finding. So I'm not going to go a lot into that, but that's really what this is doing, is it's reporting that as a federal finding as well. In this report, we are required to look at last year's findings and whether they were resolved or not. So this 2001, as I said, okay, so this had 5 bullet points last year, and now we have 2 this year. So this finding is reported as 2101 this year. The next finding, which was 2002, was related to some journal entries that needed to be made for a debt issue. That finding has been resolved, so that one is gone. 2003 is the purchase order finding that we talked about, and that's 2102. A repeat finding is 2102, so that's a repeat finding. The 2004, if you want to go down, there you go. Keep going. 2103. Okay, so 2004 is repeated this year again. And then 2005 is the purchase order, which we had to report. So we did get rid of 1 finding this year, and we whittled 1 down from 5 bullet points to 2. So otherwise, the other ones from last year will repeat this year in some form. So any questions on any of that? Oh, the 2006, that one is gone too. The 2006, the Title I grant with the timesheet approval. But we didn't find that in the federal program, so we didn't have to list it as a federal program expenditure finding.
Dr. Yvonne,
Yes, I see your
Elliott
hand.
has her hand raised.
Yes, I was just gonna say, acknowledge her. Mhm.
Thank you. I just have a question about the purchase orders. So are individuals making purchases and being reimbursed, or purchase orders not being processed, but checks are still being cut to make the payments? Could you just explain a little bit more about that, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Yeah, so it could be a combination of things. It could be someone that just made a purchase and then it gets to finance to be paid and they don't have a purchase order. Or then they'll go get a purchase order after the fact before it's paid, instead of getting the purchase order before the item is purchased.
Okay, and then with the timesheet concern, because I'm new, I'm not sure if they use Chronos or what's being used, Dr. Singleton. Is it Chronos, or what's the attendance system being used?
So our time sheets, or the tracking system we use is Nova Time. That's the name of the system we use.
Okay, so, but there are some staff that have to still do manual.
No. So these are electronic timesheets. And so generally the auditors send us those that they want to test. And I think what he's referring to here is that there are timesheets where supervisors, they could be principals, they could be budget managers. When at the end of the 2-week period, the supervisors are supposed to go in, review the time, find them. There were instances where there were probably some where they were not signed. So that's I think that's what he's finding out. And
Correct. They were signed as approved to be paid.
Right.
Okay, but they were still processed though.
Right. By law, you have to pay. When people work hours, we have to pay them. And of course, there's a timeline in order that the supervisors need to approve to get to payroll so that we can process the timesheets. And so the timesheets were paid, but they did not have the supervisor's signature, formal signature on them.
Okay, so like if somebody took off and they were using their time, would that be captured? If it's not approved, will it still be captured?
There are instances where we may have to go back and make edits to timesheets, but it could happen, Dr. Yvonne Elliott.
Okay, then my other question is around the I guess the items that are going over the over the budget? So do all leaders have access to their budget and it kind of restricts them from, like is a minus before they go over, or what's the issue with with what they're seeing to not go over their budget?
Sure. So all budget managers should have access to run regular reports. I think that could be one of the challenges, is that a lot of times finance has to be the supplier of those reports for people. And so at times we get inundated with requests to run budgets, those kinds of things. We need to make sure that, our systems are set up where you can't go over. Again, we have a new system in place where you're not supposed to go over the budget line items. And again, if there's a need for a budget transfer or a supplement, we have those in place. We bring those to the board as well. So it could be a variation of issues related to going over budget.
Okay, great. Well, good job on the improvements. So
Thank you.
just have to
Thank you.
continue working on the others. Thank you, Brian.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Mayor Jones?
Mr. Bryan, real quick question. You mentioned that on the purchase orders, that's a problem that a lot of school districts have, but apparently there's some that kind of tighten that up. What were some of the ways the other districts kind of solve that problem?
So what one of them does is they figure out who the culprit is. And so I think they call it like a pink sheet or something. It's some fiery red sheet of paper that they put what happened, what purchase was made without the purchase order. They put it, the person that did it signs it, and then it ends up in their personnel file. And then I think what they do is once they get more than a couple of those, and they come down a little harder on that person. That way they're keeping track. The person knows that, and they've been made aware of it, and then they put in their personnel file.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Beckwith or Ms. Oswald, do either of you have questions?
Yes, I put my hand up in the on the computer screen. Brian, I ask this question every year, but I'm gonna ask it again for the new board members. For a school district our size, do we have more or less findings than the average school district our size?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, we do districts that are larger than you that have no findings, and we do districts that are smaller than you that have more findings. So it's really kind of depends on just sort of what kind of internal control structure that you have, what kind of procedures that you have in place. So it's kind of hard to say. What I would say is the findings that we have today are can easily be removed next year. I think what I told them yesterday is I think the purchase order one is going to be the hardest one. The other ones seem pretty easy because you're dealing with a couple people that we can probably get those things fixed. The PO is the one you're probably going to struggle with the most.
And the second question is for Dr. Singleton. What do we do once we find that someone got the material and then issued one of the purchase order? Can we, by serial item, figure out who those people are and at least have a conversation with them about that?
Yes, Dr. Beckwith. In fact, all of these purchase orders are trackable. Who put them in, who ordered the material, those kinds of things. There's a budget number, tied to all of the purchases, and then we can go back to those budget managers and have those conversations. So yes, it is traceable, and we can have those conversations. But we really have to, really enforce the policies. And I think that at some point we have to, I like Brian's idea on yesterday, we have to start, having punitive, some kind of punishment, maybe after one or two of these infractions, then, we have to have some kind of progressive discipline related to it. So
I would agree. No more questions, Madam Chair.
Ms. Oswald, do you have questions?
I'm just wondering, we keep coming up with similar things. We've been doing this for the last umpteen years. Either the computer program doesn't jive with the people who are trained in the department, or we're not following process and procedure. Would you say that the way we do our finances and our computer programs and our procedures, are all of those compatible? Are they helping each other? Or it seems like the computer program is always the thing at fault.
Yeah. So Ms. Oswald, I would respond to that by saying that these findings are a result of a myriad of issues and things. Turnover can certainly be a challenge or something that we attribute to these findings. Every year, we're training new staff, okay? And I want to make sure that you know that finance makes a valiant effort. In fact, this past week, I did a presentation with the principals on ESSER funds. And so, next month, we plan to have an audit finding meeting. That is something that Dr. Beckwith started last year, where we take the findings and we have a meeting with everyone, but especially those that have violated these purchase orders and these procedures, to have that conversation. So it's a myriad of issues and challenges that we run into. I think a lot of it has to deal with a lack of enforcement. We have to learn to enforce the policies and procedures we have. One of the biggest challenges that we're going to run into come March is the cutoff deadline. And I can assure you that in the past, we have been liberal and allowed people to spend beyond the cutoff deadline because there were deadlines or there were the risk of us sending monies back. So what do? Do you let people spend beyond the cutoff and risk spending, risk sending or at the risk of sending monies back? So, there are a number of challenges that we run into, Ms. Oswald. The systems is one. We just, the former system of Keystone, there's no formal training on Keystone. You learn Keystone when you get into the office and you go through a number of those modules yourself. I think we need to have better supports. We are finding out right now that we have lost our project manager with Munis. We are scheduled to do the HR and the payroll conversion. We were scheduled to do that in January. Unfortunately, that's going to be delayed because the person in charge of our conversion at Munis is no longer with Munis. Okay. And so, I don't want to make any excuses. I think, as Brian indicated, these issues and these findings should be remediated. There are just small things we need to do to eliminate them. We have less than the previous year. So I'm very, very glad of that. But we're nowhere near where we should be. And so I just hope that, again, we're not making excuses. I think that we can certainly show much more improvement, and we are going to show improvement because we're going to start enforcing the rules. And I think that once we enforce the rules and people have to, people see reprimands and people see that the items that you ordered have to go back because we're not going to purchase or we're not going to pay for them because it was not a legal purchase, then I think if we do that, then I think people will really get the picture and people will understand.
Are there,
Go ahead, Mary, I'm sorry.
what you said that you had started having monthly meetings last year with the suggestion from Dr. Beckwith. Are you still having those?
It wasn't a monthly meeting. We have an annual audit meeting. So again, I think in the past, we've had these audit finding meetings here in December, and we just sit on it. You know, we don't take the information and go forth and share it. But I think the information needs to be shared with all of those, with everyone, first of all, but certainly those people who are repeat offenders, who are, you know, ordering things and it shouldn't be ordered or not going through the proper channels. So it's an annual audit meeting that we generally have around the January timeframe. But I will say twice a year at the principals meeting, finance is presenting, we're presenting these policies and procedures. We've got a procurement policies in place. And you know, unfortunately, we just are not adhering to them like we should.
I see that Dr. Miranda has her hand up with an additional question. Mary, are you through with your questions? Do you have additional questions, Mary? You're muted. You're muted, Mary.
I think she's saying no, though.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, what, okay.
okay.
Brian, going back to the concern about individuals who have access to change salaries, do you during your audit process do any type of salary payroll audits like that would specifically look at individual salary, whether or not what their increase should be, whether or not it's approved, those types of things?
So that is part of our procedure. So basically what we will do in our payroll procedure is look at, we'll pick a payroll check, a payroll run. And so if this person got $1,000 in this payroll, is that what they should have gotten based on their contract? We make sure that the personnel file is complete with W-4s, I-9s, evaluations, those types of things. So I think I'm answering your question, but yeah, we look at all of those things when we do our payroll test.
Okay, so we didn't have any concerns with that, but we just had concerns of the accessibility to make a change from individuals.
Yes, and we talked a little bit about that yesterday. So you can develop other procedures, because I think Mr. Bird was telling us that they can't like lock people out of that system. That's how the software works. You can develop other internal controls. And if that's a weakness, then you can develop a different internal control that would help alleviate that weakness.
Okay, thank you.
My questions, I believe, are, okay, I guess my first question is for you, Brian. My question ties to what Miranda just asked, and what I wanted to find out is if someone did go in and make a change, would that be identifiable as to who made the change?
I don't know. I don't know the software enough to answer that question.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
let me answer that, Ms. Real, because I believe that, and I think HR can answer the same question. Anytime there's a change made to an employee's record, there's an audit trail. Okay. So for instance, if I go in today and you know, change someone's benefits or deductions or salary, for instance, let's say the board approves a salary increase for someone. If I go in and make that change, there's an audit trail, and it'll show that I was the person that logged in, I was the person that made the change. So yes, our system does track those kind of changes.
Thank you. And my next question was this: for the information shared to the board, can you explain who the budget managers are? And then I have a question tied to that.
Yes, so budget managers are anybody with budgetary authority. So in a lot of instances, budget managers are principals, okay? They manage the budgets at their individual schools. Budget managers, for instance, I am a budget manager. I'm the chief financial officer. I'm in charge of the finance budget. Ms. Williams, the assistant superintendent of human resources, she's in charge of managing the human resources budget. Mr. Sistrunk has a communications budget. So budget managers are anyone with the authority to manage to spend, within the confines of the allocations that they've been approved.
The next question that I have is tied to that. So since these individuals are budget managers, it appears to me, based on these repeat findings, that they're not tracking their budgets. And then my question is there ever a time that they track their budgets and then balance, that's a word from banking, I guess, or reconcile those budgets with you all to make sure that they understand where they are in their spending? Because this keeps continue to happen. So to me, from a banking standpoint, that means that somebody is really not keeping a close eye and monitoring and documenting what they have spent.
Okay. So let me say this. I don't think that I don't think the audit pointed to a lot of people exceeding their budgets. There's some discussion, about the debt service piece, and we've had several meetings and discussions about that portion of that. But I don't think there's any discussion or concerns about individuals exceeding their budgets, because in most instances, the system won't allow you. So you have to stop spending, and either you come before the SAB and ask for a supplement, or you do a transfer from another line item that has money. But I think these findings are related to individuals. For instance, the issue comes down to, I have a mouse in my hand, okay? And if you go through the proper purchasing procedures, it starts with a requisition, okay? That requisition turns into a purchase order, okay? And then once that purchase order has been established and generated, finance sends this over to the vendor, and then the vendor knows that now the purchase has been approved and you're able to send this mouse, okay? Now, the issue that we're seeing, Ms. Morrow Real, is in most instances, this mouse is in your hand before you've even gone to the system and done anything related to the purchasing process. So how'd you get the mouse, when there's no requisition, there's no purchase order, and unfortunately, finance, we have to pay the bills. We have to pay for that mouse because someone has obligated the district to purchase this mouse, okay? And so we can't afford to have the district's credit tied up because employees have done things in a different fashion. So again, I think in the audit meeting that we have with all of the budget managers, I think that's where we can have a more intense discussion on following these protocols, and then what are the solutions or what are the punishments for not following these protocols. The other issue is, again, signing employees' time. That has been a challenge for umpteen years, where supervisors are just not signing their employees' times. And by law, we have to pay them according to the hours that they have recorded, okay? And so, what do? We can't break the law and not pay them and subject the district to lawsuits, but yet and still, there's a timesheet where a supervisor has not given their level of approval. And so again, I believe some of these findings can be worked out, but I do believe that we have to come up with policies and punishments. Okay, we have policies. Let me back up. We have to come up with repercussions, and we have to be consistent in how we enforce them.
And thank you. And I did understand that. Maybe I used the wrong term, because that's what I'm trying to say. Every day, anything that I do with my job, it's got to be reconciled to make sure that what I'm allowed to spend is documented. And then I understand that I cannot spend until my supervisor has signed off on it. So that's what I was trying to relate to. It sounds like to me that the budget managers, when they see purchases coming to their building, they ought to be able to say, okay, where's the invoice at? Or something like that. And so that's what my concern is. Maybe I said it wrong from a banking standpoint.
Yeah, no, Ms. Morrow, I totally agree. And I think that you are saying it exactly right. Budget managers have to be more accountable to the budgets that they are approved to manage. And that's really what it amounts to.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have any final questions that they wanted to ask with regards to our budget?
I just had a piggyback from what you just said. How at this point, how many persons have to sign off on that process? So does it come, once the budget manager approves it, then does it come to you, Dr. Singleton, and then the superintendent? What's the approval chain?
So right now, the approval chain is really, it starts with the, maybe I'm the building secretary and I enter the requisition. From there, someone needs to approve it, okay? And it may be the building principal. Maybe the building principal goes into and approve the requisition, okay? Once the building principal approves the requisition, then it comes to finance to convert that requisition to a purchase order, okay? So if it's for my department, I do the conversions and other budget managers. And so once that is converted into a purchase order, that seals the district into, that locks us into paying that obligation, and it gives formal approval of the process. And so that's typically what we're seeing. So we've got at least 3 levels of approval in there between the person entering the requisition and the final approval.
So these companies are actually processing orders without a purchase order number.
Well, and they are, yes, there are times where our vendors are at fault, because our vendors, in order to do business with us, you must, you operate under the district's purchasing and procurement policies. So there are times where vendors are at fault, okay? And I will tell you, there are times where we have sent orders back. There were some computers that were ordered and we didn't have the proper purchasing material. That's a big obligation. And I sent them back, okay? They were sitting at a school and we shipped them back at the vendor's expense. So there are times where we push back on these things, but the standard issues that we're dealing with are T-shirt orders. Okay, that's a big one where you call mom and pop store up the street or in the county and say, I want T-shirts. What are they going to do? They'll have you those T-shirts tomorrow or the next day. Okay, and then they'll give you the invoice a week or so later. And so that's not the policies or the procurement process. We have to start with the requisition. We get the purchase order. Once the vendor has that purchase order, then you release the T-shirts, okay? And so it's just been happening in the opposite. And so that's a concern.
Okay, but you helping us to put the picture together. So we need to suspend some vendors and address some budget managers and other individuals with training or whatever needs to be done. So I think we got a handle on what needs to go.
I think so too, Dr.
Okay.
Elliott. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Brian or for myself? Okay, and I do want to, in closing, Madam Chair, just thank KEB. They have been our auditors for quite some time. We did do an RFP last year for audit services, and it's not that they weren't doing a great job. It was just that they have been our auditors for so long. We wanted to see if there was anyone else out there who wanted to, who could certainly come in and look at the district's books and everything. But I'm proud to say that KEB won the contract again. I think they were actually the only firm who bidded on the district's finances. And so I just think they do outstanding work. They work us hard. I will tell you that Mr. Byrd and Mr. Smith and the rest of the finance team, Ms. Jones and Ms. Lee and all of us, Mr. Howard, are working daily and when these auditors ask for material. Let me also give a shout out to Ms. Williams, because there was some potential findings in her areas and she pushed back and she said, no, those files are right. And so she got one of her bullet points eliminated. So Ms. Williams, I'm publicly letting the board know that you are a budget manager who managed your budget, okay? And so she helped push back on some of her findings. And so that's really what we need with all of the budget managers, is to say, hey, listen, I own this. This is mine. I'm responsible, and I'm going to take leadership and take charge. So thank you to KEB for your work. Overall, we do have findings. We have less than last year. Dr. Pruitt-Adams has challenged us and said 0 findings. So Dr. Pruitt-Adams, I'm going to do my best. I won't go on record and promise you 0 findings, but we are certainly going to do our best to eliminate these repeat findings and put ourselves in a better situation. So thank you, KB.
I'm gonna
for the
hold
audit.
you to that.
Ms. Mario,
Yes, Dr.
Ms. Mar-
Beck.
one final question to Brian. Where are you all on that special audit that you were doing for the SAB?
Yeah, I apologize for that. We've been just really consumed trying to get these audits out. Excuse me. And so we'll be starting to hit that again probably after the Christmas break. We'll be back out there and we'll get that thing finished up pretty quickly for you.
Did Ms. Williams deliver a baby?
She did. She had a little girl. Her name's Olivia. She's actually back working part-time for us right now at home, and she doesn't have childcare until January, so she'll be back in the office in January.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for Brian for the thorough audit. And thank you, Dr. Singleton, for your remarks as well. At this time, I would like a motion to approve the independent audit and the financial statements that were
So moved.
submitted.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there a need for a roll call vote, Shay? Okay.
No,
thank-
ma'am. All in favor, everyone
Yes, they
was in
did.
favor. No,
Yes,
ma'am.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to be for sure, since it was such an important issue. Thank you. At this time, we are going to make a motion to move into executive session. And Shay will assure that only the SAB members will continue in this next section. So may
So
I
moved.
have a motion?
So moved.
Tomorrow, Rio,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, do you need me in executive session for any questions, or should I also log out?
You can, I'm not going to say, no, I don't think we need you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. I really don't.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Mhm.
Been moved in second.
Yes, all in
Now,
favor?
roll call, we have
Oh,
a roll call.
vote. All right, yes, that's
Yes.
right. Roll call
Dr.
vote.
Beckwith, Dr. Beckwith,
Here. Yes, I'm sorry.
Ms. Oswald, that's okay. Ms. Oswald,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Yvonne Elliott,
Yes.
and Ms. Maria.
Yes. We'll move into executive session, but then we'll allow time for people to fall off the
Good
computer.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Good
You're
night.
welcome.
Night,
Thank you.
Have a happy
everyone.
holiday.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
all.
Good evening, happy
holidays.
holidays.
Yeah, Miss Shay can